Hello, my friends. I am Dee, and this is Bee's Intuition. Today, we're going to do a reading. I'm going to try and make it a quickie. Hold me accountable. um, but yeah, I was really intrigued by the last full length reading I did, where I was like, um, I want to say it was the one where it's like, what about you gets people all fired up? And so I kind of want to just explore like your effect on people a little bit deeper or a little bit further. Um, I'm like I guess I'm a little indecisive because I'm like I don't know if I want to go with the topic of like what is your effect on people, or maybe because there was like a part in that last reading where it was like you put the fear of God in people and I thought that was really funny. And so it kind of was like, what about, doing something along the lines of like, what about you puts the fear of God in people? hmm I kind of like the latter. I think I'll do that one actually, because that sounds way more interesting, right? Okay, so let's just do like what puts the fear of, what about you puts the fear of God in people? Because I'm curious. Like our collective must be crazy powerful. Um, yeah, let's dive right into it. Please and thank you, Spirit. What about the collective puts the fear of God in people? What scares them straight? What about the collective puts the fear of God in people? Sounds like insane to say out loud, but it's what came through that last reading, and so I want to explore that a little bit more. Please and thank you, Spirit. Okay, so that one first, and that was last, and this was second. Okay, yeah. All right, any others flipped over? Nope. Okay. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I like that. Okay, so what came out? We have the Five of Wands. Oh no, I forgot about the wind. Not the wand. No. Okay. And then the Three of Wands. And then the Knight of Cups. And then bottom of the deck is the Ten of Pentacles. Okay. Interesting. So, Five of Wands first. Let's clarify that. Please and thank you, Spirit. What about the collective puts the fear of God in people with that Five of Wands? Please and thank you. Can you clarify that Five of Wands for us? What about the collective puts the fear of God in people? We all want to know, right? At least I want to know. And that's enough, right? Anyways, please and thank you, Spirit. What about the collective puts the fear of God in people? Please and thank you, Spirit. With that Five of Wands, please and thank you. Okay. I already like this one. Okay. So, the Five of Wands clarified by the Six of Cups. The Four of Swords came out in the reverse. Very interesting. And then we have the High Priestess and the Death card, which I find fitting with the whole like topic of like what about you puts the fear of God in people. It's like, oh, death. You remind people of their mortality more than likely. So, Five of Wands. That's such an interesting energy with this context. It feels like there are so many people that I don't even know how to word this, because it's almost like it almost feels like everybody that meets you may see a different side to you that other people don't see, or pick up on things that other people don't pick up on. And so I feel like everybody has like their own opinion of you in their own way, if that makes any sense. And so, but each of those opinions feel very powerful and potent and strong. So I feel like you get really strong responses out of people, whether that's good, bad, or ugly, or something in between. And I think that alone probably indicates that you just have that sort of presence about you that is like intense, or just like a big energy sort of. And I almost feel like people don't even know really how to make up their mind about you fully. The Six of Cups tells me that people see you giving to others, being kind and giving to others. You try your best to do good deeds in this 3D reality, and I feel like people notice that about you. Um, and that alone could definitely put the fear of God in people, because it's like, if the collective is out there doing good things, um, treating people with respect, dignity, love, care, compassion, all of those things that seem to be lacking in the world today, then it's like, oh, well, then what am I doing with my life? How am I living my life? How am I showing up for others? Am I also caring and compassionate, or am I stingy with my love? Am I closed off to other people? Do I create that atmosphere of a welcoming community? And do I actively contribute to that community in some way that's, beneficial? Or, do I kind of just stick to myself? Or maybe do I just focus on my own things? Or do I focus on other things? Do I show up in a way that's kind and loving? Or do I show up in a way that's maybe judgmental? Um, because you have this very beautiful heart, I see. You also have this safe energy that comes along with it. People feel well cared for in your presence. And I feel like that makes people reflect. Do I also create that kind, loving presence? Or do I do something else with my energy? Do I show up in a different sort of way? And so I think you kind of reflect back to people, what am I doing or not doing in my life? And what does that say about me? Because it almost feels like there's something about the way you show up that is very much true to who you are, and it feels very much like be the change you wish to see in the world, that kind of mentality. And so I think that kind of forces people to kind of face either, am I showing up in this way, like the collective, or am I showing up in a way that I'm not proud of? It could even be part of your reputation, the Six of Cups, because this feels like something that you're kind of known for. People remember you as that person that gives to others. So the Four of Swords in the reverse is so interesting to me, because I see it in a couple different ways. First off, I think that you probably are very good at doing the Four of Swords upright, which is like taking time out for yourself, recharging your social battery if that is necessary, caring for yourself, resting, maybe meditation, maybe communication with spirit, or getting in touch with your intuition, setting aside time to do that. I think you're really good at that. And then I feel like that is another way that you kind of reflect something back to other people. And I feel like these other people are like, well, do I take the time to practice self-care, to take time out for myself, to rest when I need it, to listen to my intuition, or even just listen to my body? If my body needs time to rest, do I listen to that, or do I force myself to do things, regardless of how I'm feeling inside? I feel like you kind of cause people to think like maybe there's something to this self-care thing. Maybe there's something to taking care of yourself, prioritizing your health, your wellness, so that you can kind of stay clear-headed, clear-minded, and also like more, I'm getting the word productive, but it feels like you kind of like, when you care for yourself, you can kind of use the energy that you gain through doing that, and you can kind of pour it into the things that are important to you. And I feel like you kind of cause that reflection for people, like, am I doing that as well, or am I doing something else with my time? Also, the Four of Swords upright is very much about self-reflection, and I feel like you cause people to think like, do I take time out to self-reflect on my actions, on the way I'm showing up in the 3D? I feel like a lot of people that you encounter probably don't take good care of themselves because it feels like they kind of judge themselves and judge how they're not showing up for themselves, because it's almost like the way you show up is not just caring for other people, but you also show people that it's important to care for yourself as well. And so I feel like people may even think, one, they may judge you on this, I feel, because they're not personally doing that kind of work. And so they might even see that as being selfish. Oh, I can't believe the collective would take time out to practice self care. That means that they are vain and arrogant and full of themselves. Or, I can't believe the collective would prioritize their own wellness and health above other people. They're so selfish and greedy, you know? And it's like, obviously all of that is just projections because they themselves feel like they're lacking in that department. So they may even try to twist it into something nasty, like, oh, can you believe it? They love themselves. They're practicing self-love and self-care. How dare they? Which is funny because it's like, really? Yeah. But there is something about how you do keep to yourself, which is funny because it almost seems like a contrast with the Six of Cups energy I was picking up on, where it's like you're so giving to other people, but yet you also spend a lot of your time on your own. You're very quiet, you kind of keep to yourself. You're very wise and like you are very intuitive, and maybe people see this in you, but you're more or less a mystery to people, I feel, with this High Priestess energy. But that makes sense with the message I was getting with the Five of Wands, that this is all clarifying, because I was getting that, you know, kind of everybody has their own opinion of you, and very wait, what's the phrasing I'm looking for? There's, what is the word I'm looking for? Pretty much everybody has their own opinion of you, and very not often do those opinions overlap or agree with one another, I guess, you know, because it feels like everybody has their hot take on you. And maybe certain people think that they are more observant of others, especially the people that may want to look for something to hate on when it comes to you. Um, like maybe like I don't know why, but I'm getting this like feeling of like people like watching you and being like, you know, being like, oh, did you see the way that they walk? That means that they are lazy. I don't know. Like, you know, it's like they look for any tiny little detail. And then I feel like certain people feel like they're so smart for being like, oh, see, you didn't notice the way that they breathe heavily. They breathe heavily when they're walking. That means they're lazy and gross, you know, like whatever. Like it's like they'll try to find like little tiny things and then feel like, haha, I noticed this small little detail and that makes me smart. Um, which is so funny because it's almost like people want to be you in certain aspects, in terms of like, because I think you're very perceptive. I think that you have not only that intuition, but because you stay silent, you let people show up in the way that is most authentic to who they are. You don't put any pressures on people. You don't expect them to show up in any specific way, and that reveals that person's truth to you. I feel like you're very observant. You notice little details about people, but the thing about you is you don't tell people this. You're not just like going, you know, you notice that somebody has a limp, and you know that may mean that they were, I don't know, in an accident or something. And so like you could, if you wanted to just, you know, gossip and stuff to your neighbors or whatever, you might want to, if you're in that lower vibration, you might be like, oh, did you see the way that they're walking? Oh, there's a limp, you know. But it's like you notice all of that stuff, but you don't say anything about it. And I feel like that kind of even catches people off guard, because I almost feel like when you do open your mouth, you show that you're noticing every tiny little detail, but you don't feel the need to have to like boast about your observation skills or the way that you're super intuitive. Oh, I'm so intuitive. Blah, blah, blah. Like, no, You just kind of do what you do. People probably take offense to the fact that you're very quiet, but it's like, but also it's like I feel like people just want to. I feel like you're probably one of those people that people just love to hate, you know? And it's like they don't really have any real reason to hate against you, but it's like because you're not showing up in a way that they think you should, then it's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. That's so bad that they're doing that. But at the same time, like these same people that say that they hate that you don't talk, or, you know, they think it's sketchy that you don't talk. What are they hiding? Blah, 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 blah. If you were to talk, they probably would also hate on that. It's like, oh, they never shut up. God, it's like, I feel like, you know, this is definitely the type of energy where it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. People will always have their opinions. And I feel like that's kind of why you just do whatever the hell you do that is naturally authentic to who you are. Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to have their judgment, everybody's going to have their own opinion. And if you kept like accepting every single person's opinion about you and internalize that and stuff, you would never be able to live your goddamn life, right? But it's almost like because you show up in a way that kind of gives a spiritual sort of energy, I feel like this again also causes people to reflect on their spiritual beliefs and maybe their spiritual practices. Because there's also that part of spirituality, you know, I would say true spirituality, where it's like you take the things that you truly believe and you kind of apply them to the real world. And, you know, there are certain people that belong to either certain spirituality beliefs or religious beliefs, and they would maybe identify as, say, a Christian, but do they show up in ways that reflect the positive Christian values, such as caring for thy neighbor? So I feel like because you show up in a way that's authentic, in a way that is probably openly pretty spiritual, people probably think, I feel like people probably, I almost said expect, so maybe that's what it is. People may expect you to judge them. And I feel like it's not for any reason other than maybe because you're so quiet and observant, but also because they like to judge. And so they just assume everybody's like them, even if you're not judging anyone. You're like the keeper of secrets, too. You may be very like well trusted. Oh, duckies. I love hearing the duckies. I'll put in the spiritual meaning of the duckies. Um, Usually around here they're just mallard ducks, but still cute. And they probably have their, you know, meaning, maybe given this context of this reading. Um, I got distracted by the duckies. I can't remember where I was going with that. It's like you practice what you preach, and I feel like that helps you to show up in a very powerful way, because not everybody practices what they preach. They don't always, you know, translate their beliefs into actions, whereas I think you do. Because it's almost like, yeah, you may look quiet, you may look a little bit unassuming, but I feel like you also, I don't know how to word this because it feels like kind of contrasting. And again, probably because everybody has different opinions of you and viewpoints, but it's almost like you do have these moments of silence, these moments of quiet meditation, keeping to yourself, not doing a whole lot of you know, a lot of anything that's observing, able to be observed. But then there are moments where you're acting upon your beliefs, such as showing up in a kind, considerate way for others. And I feel like you very much are of the belief that you should show up in the way that you choose to be, or you would like to be treated, but also the change you'd like to see in the world. I feel like you also nurture yourself in a way that kind of gives you this abundant energy. And I feel like that comes from true internal work, and consistent internal work, such as like focusing on your self growth, your self worth, your self love, um, feeding your confidence in ways that are not attached to the ego. And it gives off this very abundant energy because it's almost like you recognize your own power. But at the same time, you don't feel the need to like blab about it to the world. You're like, I know what I got. That's fine. And I feel like this kind of confuses people though. Because it almost feels like if I were them and I had that much stuff going for me, I would be so loud about it. I'd never shut up. It's like these are people that probably never shut up to begin with, but I don't know. But it feels like there's definitely like this envious nature that people have when it comes to you. And it feels like, again, people love to judge you, is what it feels like. And the irony is, I don't think you're very judgmental, but people may perceive you to be judgmental, but also they themselves are incredibly judgmental. Because it's almost like people would like to use you as a puppet in some sense. Like, if they could just, I don't know, embody who you are, they would do so many different things with that probably would be an abuse of power, or would be maybe more ego based, more socially or social validation based. And you just don't feel the need to do that. Because again, there's like this quiet confidence to you where it's just like, I know what I got going on. And it's like unshakable. But yeah, I think that part of what puts the fear of God in people is the fact that people feel judged by you. But again, it's really just a projection of how they are. They themselves are incredibly judgmental. And so they assume everybody else is just like them, as judgmental as they are. But I really don't think you are. And if you judge people, it's probably out of, how they treat other people, or how they're showing up in the 3D in like actually proven ways. You know what I mean? Like, you observe people, and if you notice that they are, abusing their dog, yeah, you're going to judge them. If you notice that they are cruel to the people that they talk to, of course you're going to judge that, right? Because it's like, those are the things that make up who we actually are, how we're showing up in the 3D, the actions that we take and make. They are all that, they all add up to who we are at the end of the day, right? But yeah. And then the death card. I'm getting the song I've Got Friends on the Other Side from Princess and the Frog. I can't remember that character's name. He's the I don't know. I don't want to sound super ignorant, but it's like maybe the hoodoo or the voodoo doctor professional. uh, you know, he's seen as like the villain of the story. But yeah, he has a connection to the other world. Is pretty much what is the message I'm getting through that being channeled. I'm just saying, like, people may think you have friends on the other side. And I think that is scary to them. But the thing is, even if you do have friends on the other side, like, why? Because in this context, I'm feeling like people see this as a bad thing. Like, oh, they probably like summon demons and stuff. And it's just like, why do you have to jump to that? Why do you have to put a negative twist on things like that? If I have friends on the other side, maybe they're really good, high vibrational friends on the other side. Maybe they're my ancestors that protect me. Maybe it's spirit giving me some advice, some direction in life. I don't know. It's so weird because it's almost like people may even think that you are demonic or evil. But again, Feels like a lot of projection going on here. But in terms of what puts the fear of God in people, people I think don't want to get on your bad side. And maybe this is why they get so upset about you not being more vocal or not being more social, maybe not talking more, is because they don't know what you're working with. They don't know, your alliances on the other side. And so I think that when they don't know, that causes fear, and they may just simply assume, jump to conclusions about, the energies you work with. But also at the same time, this death card is also hitting me as an ego death. It almost feels like because you show up in this way that's really not that attached to the ego. Hell, I'd say it probably is very removed from the ego even. But the people you encounter, I almost feel like they don't realize how attached they are to their ego and all of the things that come with that. The insecurities, the toxic outward expressions of the ego, being triggered and then, doing something with that in a way that's toxic or hurts other people. You kind of, so it feels like it almost feels like your presence kind of kills off people's former selves, maybe the selves that are more ego based, or the people that they were before they met you. And either you can be the catalyst for their change to become more enlightened and whatnot. But at the same time, it's almost like there's people that may kind of go with the flow in terms of like, okay, this person is here and they're showing up in a way that makes me reflect upon my own actions, my own stuff. And so then they can change if they choose to. But then there's also people, just like with death, that kind of really try to resist it, right? I feel like everybody at the end of their life is like, I'm not ready, or sorry, there's something floating in the water and I'm just like so curious. Looks like a dog bowl or something, or a cup. Doesn't matter, but of course I'm just like so curious. Anyways, focus. But yeah, like just like with regular death, people can either go with the flow and be like, okay, death has the final say. I accept this, I detach, and therefore I can maybe pass on a little bit easier. But then there's the ones that are fighters, right? And well, not fighters in the way that we typically think of fighters in the spiritual sense, like, fighting for what is important to us, but rather fighters against change, fighters against the natural cycle of life. And just like with you, it's like, apply this rather to the ego, and people are resisting, this ego death that is very important if we want to evolve as people, if we want to move past our own toxicities and grow and learn and change and adapt. There are people that are resistant of, questioning themselves, their actions, their thoughts, their behavior, the ability to reflect. I feel like there are certain people that avoid that like the plague. And so it's like your presence kind of helps people to feel either motivated and inspired to work on that, or they go the other direction with it, where they're just like trying with all of their might to not do any self-reflection, to not look deeper into things, the way that they act, the way that they live their life. But you still raise awareness of that, and kind of you show that to people in a way that I don't think that you're like meaning to. I don't think you're like, hey, your ego, you need to fix that. I mean, you may think it, right? But I don't think you're showing up in a way that's like, you need to do this. It's more so like just the way that you show up, your literal presence. It's like, okay, I can either roll with this and stop resisting that ego death, or I can completely go so deep into my ego that everything I do is based in the ego, and I'm never wrong, and I'm always doing everything perfectly. I don't need any criticism because I know that I'm perfect in every way. Like, that kind of thing. But yeah, you also kind of just remind people of their own mortality. And I feel like, again, this could go in the it could be more related to, like, okay, am I going to experience judgment on the other side for my life and the way that I've lived my life, the things I've done? Yeah, and maybe it's just simply because you're so spiritual, or you show up in a way that's authentic. Somehow you bring up this idea of, one day I'm going to die, and am I doing things that I will be proud of when, it's time for me to maybe reflect on that? Or am I doing the opposite? Yeah. So it's like not only the ego death, but regular death. It's like you bring these things up to people's awareness, simply by just doing your thing. Because that's another thing, like, with this image is like, people may be like, oh, no, death, I'm not ready. Yeah, death, stay away from me. You're so scary and mean. How dare you? But at the end of the day, death is just doing what they do, right? The energy, the embodiment of death here is like, what? I'm just doing my job. Why are you so hating? Like, why are you hating on me? Why are you so resistant to me? I'm simply just a part of life. But certain people can't accept that. I'm going to put on my sweatshirt because it's getting a little bit chilly. And this is probably taking longer than I thought it would, or than I was trying to make it. But I'm sure it probably already is past like a quickie. No, probably not quite. Probably around the half-hour point, I would assume. 30 to 40 minutes-ish. I'm going to check that back later and probably be exactly wrong. Anyways. Based on where the sun is in the sky. I'm just kidding. I'm not that in touch with nature to know, like, oh yes, in the direction, in the sky. Anyways, Two of Swords at the bottom of the deck. I think I forgot to show you the bottom of the deck, but Two of Swords. So you show people their blind spots. Oh, sorry if I'm like messing with the sound with my jacket. But you also show people like how they're so afraid of leaving their comfort zone, because I think that you have overcome that sense of like being stuck in your comfort zone. And now people like observe you and they're like, wow, this person is not afraid of like, doing things that make them uncomfortable. Let's see what's underneath that Two of Swords. Knight of Swords. Yeah, you go, there's something very straightforward with the way that you communicate that I feel like people may either take offense to or admire about you. But it also feels like you're very like action oriented, which is so funny because we have the High Priestess, which you would think wouldn't be, so action oriented. But it's like you go for the things that you're, that are important to you. I feel like you really believe in justice. And it's almost like, these are the people that judge you and maybe can't move out of their comfort zone. Meanwhile, you're over here like running out of your comfort zone. You have no fear of the unknown, at least not in other people's eyes. Okay, let's go on to the Three of Wands. Oh, it's gonna get cold now because the sun set and I didn't realize it was gonna set so soon. Actually, it did. No, I guess I didn't really anticipate it doing it this soon. Okay, anything else for that Three of Wands, please and thank you, Spirit. Three of Wands, please and thank you. What about the collective puts the fear of God in them? Okay. It came out very messily, but maybe that was intentional. Okay, so clarifying that Three of Wands, we have, Page of Cups, Knight of Swords, Two of Swords, Knight of Pentacles, and then Strength card and Queen of Swords came out like that. And the Fool card and the Three of Wands came out like that. That's kind of funny, actually, because, okay, if I can just straighten out my cards, that'd be so helpful. With that Page of Cups, I feel like you show up in a way that's very open-hearted, and people don't understand that, but you also move towards things that you think are important. You don't let things hold you back, but other people do, and so they feel like, okay, I must be doing something wrong here. Also, we're clarifying the Three of Wands, which I feel like can be an indicator of something changing, and probably relatively soon. And so I almost feel like maybe people see changes taking place in your life as a direct result of you being sort of fearless and very motivated. It almost even feels like with that Knight of Swords and now the Knight of Pentacles, it almost feels like people kind of, through maybe observing you and the way you live your life, it's almost like people may, because they're not exactly like you, they may feel judged by you, or they may feel like that you judge them or something. But also, and also notice how the horse here is still, not moving. So it's almost like people kind of know they should act, but they don't because they're maybe afraid. Or maybe they haven't considered every single little detail, but it's almost like you have that wisdom of you don't need to know every single detail before you act. You know, you don't need to know exactly how everything's going to work out perfectly before you act. Sometimes it's just a matter of trusting in the process, trusting in yourself, trusting in the universe, trusting in spirit. But I feel like other people may not have that sort of wisdom yet. And so they observe you and they're just like, well, how do they do it? And with the way that the Strength card and the Queen of Swords came out like that, that feels like you show up in a way that is strong and in a way that is very clear-headed. You have a lot of courage to you, but also a lot of divine wisdom. You also see through things. You don't really get fooled by people or by situations. I feel like because of the way that they came out too, it feels almost like maybe people see your strength and your clear-headed energy serving you in some way. You also just like have like clear vision, a clear mind. And I feel like people are almost envious of that because it's almost like you have this self-assuredness that they lack. And it's interesting too that we're clarifying the Three of Wands and then there is the Three of Wands there, but it came out like this. And so with that context, I would say that these are the things that people are afraid of doing. So whereas that Three of Wands upright, which we're clarifying, I feel like embodies your energy. You're like, okay, what's the next step? What's, what's right around the corner? I'm ready for it. You kind of just accept and kind of roll in a way that is productive or useful or fulfilling. You kind of like roll with the way that life is sort of unexpected and things can happen. Whereas other people are afraid. And, the fear of the Fool coming out like this, I feel like that is indicating that people are afraid of even though the Fool isn't the card of the unknown, the Moon card probably would be more accurate to that. But in terms of the Fool, it is a little bit about the unknown because it's a new beginning that you haven't really experienced before. But the Fool is very trusting in spirit to guide him down the right path. And so I feel like people don't trust in the divine like you do. And so they feel like these things are actively holding them back. And I feel like people do a lot of comparison between themselves and you because you seem to be able to do this, go towards the things that may be scary at first or the unknown, and maybe even, if something requires maybe a decision to be made rather rather soon. I feel like you can kind of do that easier than other people, or at least this is what people see or think. And I feel like there's something about just like you have clear vision, you have a clear mind. And I feel like that is probably due to either your intuition or your connection to spirit and maybe just your experiences, your history of experiences. Um, it allows you to be trusting. It allows you to move forward without these fears and restrictions and, the chains that bind the everyday person. I also feel like you encourage other people to do maybe what they're afraid of or to go into new chapters, even if it's scary, even if they don't know what's going to happen. But there's a lot of people that are resistant to that, I feel. And so, what puts the fear of God in these people through your energy is um, there's just a way that you tap into the spirit that I feel like people feel like they're lacking. And you have a trust in spirit that a lot of people struggle to have. And so they may judge themselves compared to you. It's almost like they know that it would be helpful or maybe even beneficial to sort of embody that trust in spirit, but they feel stuck. They feel like they can't. They feel like they need more details, more, um, you know, more reassurances. But the thing is, life isn't like that. And I feel like you know that, but other people feel like they struggle with that. Because there's almost a sense of acceptance that you have, and maybe even slight detachment that I feel like other people don't have, but they see that in you. And so I think that, this part of the reading, like what puts the fear of God in people, is probably the fact that you have like a very close connection to spirit. And it's almost like some people might even say, because you're so trusting of spirit, that you're almost like winning points with spirit. And so it's almost like when you pass on, it's like, oh yeah, sure, they'll probably, get right into heaven. Whereas, other people, they're like, oh, well, I won't because I don't trust in spirit or because I don't do these things or I don't, you know, listen to my intuition. All those types of things. At the bottom of the deck is the Five of Pentacles. Yeah, they see you as being illuminated, like enlightened, and they feel like they are not. It's almost like, and the thing is, I don't think that you're very stingy with your energy or unfair with it and your knowledge. I feel like you probably would have useful information for other people that feel this way. But it's almost like they put their own restrictions on themselves, and it's probably due to the ego. It's almost like they are like, well, I can't ask for help because, they have a sense of pride about them, or they were, you know, socialized to believe that it's, a bad thing to ask people for advice. It's a bad thing to ask people for help, or direction or wisdom, nuggets of knowledge and information. And so it's not even that you are closed off to these people completely. It's rather that they are like put these constraints on themselves and they restrain themselves and they make themselves feel trapped to the point where they're like, okay, well, I can't possibly improve. I can't possibly ask the collective for advice because, they have that sense of self pride. And it's like, okay, but like, is that pride serving you in any way? Is it helping you live a happier life? Most of the time, not. There's really no shame in getting help. There's no shame in asking somebody for advice or knowledge or whatever, tidbits of information that they need. Um, but because of the way that we are typically socialized, we typically see that as a bad thing. And, oh, only scummy people ask for help. Only scummy people ask for, you know, help from other people. I'm going to see what's underneath that Five of Pentacles. Page of Pentacles. Page of Pentacles. Oh, geez. Stammering. It's actually very interesting, the imagery here, because the yellow light of the church there through the window, and then the yellow background of this card. So it's really like this is your energy, but people feel like there's a wall or there's some sort of boundary that keeps you from them and them from you, in terms of like you're unattainable, or you are untouchable, or you have a secret that the rest of us don't have. um, and I feel like people look at you with envy when they could really just be open to the fact that, maybe you have useful information for them. If they put their pride aside and their ego, maybe they would get something beneficial out of that. But because these people have such a, they're so attached to the ego, they can't possibly consider to ask for help or guidance or whatever. They don't receive that information. But instead of being like, maybe I should, work on my ego, work on my pride, they tend to blame you rather than, kind of reflecting and accepting responsibility for their actions or inactions. Because I think you do have something very valuable here. And people, if they were in the right mindset, if they were a little bit more removed from the ego, I feel like you would actually be able to help these people. Because I feel like you probably know what it's like to be in these positions too, but you broke free of it. Whereas these people haven't. Either they will not or they have not yet. But it's like, yeah, it's almost like people feel like, oh, I don't even know how to word this. It's almost like you have the secret to life and people judge you for that and they're jealous of that, but they don't do anything to try and achieve that for themselves or get the resources or information that are necessary to help set themselves up for doing that as well. And they'd just rather hate from the sidelines, is what I feel with that. Okay, let's go on to the Knight of Cups. Please and thank you, Spirit. Can you clarify that Knight of Cups? What about the collective? What's the fear of God in people? Please and thank you, Spirit. What about the collective? What's the fear of God in people? That Knight of Cups. Please and thank you, Spirit. Please and thank you. Knight of Cups. Please and thank you. Okay. Only one card came out, but that probably is significant. Knight of Cups coming out, clarified by the Three of Cups coming out in this direction. Very interesting. There's a way. Oh, and bottom of the deck is the Nine of Pentacles. So with this Knight of Cups, I feel like you have a very open heart, very open with your expressions of love. And this doesn't have to be romantic specifically. I think you're just a very loving person, a very open person with your heart. And I feel like you do that intentionally to help encourage other people to be open with their heart, for them to show up in kind and loving ways as well. But I feel like there are people, there may even be specifically a group of people that may actually be actively kind of talking smack about the way you show up. Like maybe they even want to go as far as to say like, oh, the collective's dumb for being so open with their heart. But the thing is too, I think that you're mature enough to realize you have boundaries and that it's important to have healthy boundaries when it comes to being open with your heart. I don't think you're gullible. I don't think you're stupid. I think that people project onto you. But with the way that the Three of Cups came out like that, I feel like a lot of people fear being open with their heart because they've been hurt by other people, probably people that were close to them. And so now they have this fear of opening up their heart to people around them. And instead of like reflecting on that and being like, okay, maybe I need to work on that, they'd rather look at you and judge you for that and be like, oh, can you believe they're doing that? How dare they? But it's also like, that it's so fulfilling to be open with your heart. The connections that are possible to make with that, being more open with your heart. And it's something that other people probably feel like they're lacking in reality, but they feel almost like, oh, I can't possibly do that. The collective may be able to do that, but I can't. But it's because they're putting restrictions on themselves. There's also so much growth that is possible to take place when it comes to being open with others, being loving, and maybe compassionate, supportive. Yeah, and it's just like a recurring message through this reading of you show up in a way that people would love to be able to embody, but for some reason they put restrictions on themselves to make them feel like they can't possibly do what you do. And it even feels like excuses with that 3 of Cups coming out the way that it did. It's almost like, well, if I wasn't hurt by every friend I ever had, I would be more friendly. Or, if people didn't make fun of me when I was little, I would be more open. Or if I didn't have this, this, and this going on, I would be more open. Or, the thing is, everybody can make excuses for anything, regardless of how true those things are. um, because it's almost like you probably have very similar backgrounds to these people, but yet you still show up in a way that is so drastically different from them that they have to like jump to conclusions maybe about what you've been through or your backstory, maybe painting over your backstory, um, to make you sound maybe way more privileged than you were growing up, or you know that you had certain things that they never had, and therefore that's why you are successful and they're not, or that's why you are so loving and they're not. But it's almost like if they knew your backstory, they probably would be surprised and shocked even that you grew up in a very similar way that they did, or had similar things happen, or had, yeah, like that you probably had way more similar upbringings than they would like to admit or would think or assume. The 9 of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck, that's a beautiful energy. You're showing up in a way that is very much independent, but you're also very skilled, you're abundant, and I feel like that comes from within, that sense of that energy of abundance. There's something about the peace that you have with who you are, how you're living your life, that other people feel like they lack. And so instead of trying to make that happen for themselves, they'd much rather just like watch you, judge you, and jump to conclusions about who you are, what your backstory is, the things that you've gone through or haven't gone through. Yeah. And this kind of speaks to boundaries to me to a certain extent, because it's like you still prioritize your own wellness over being like a doormat or something, or like somebody to walk all over. You're not gullible, you're not stupid, you're not here to um, be used and abused. Like you're not a punching bag um, for other people. It's like you know how to prioritize yourself, your own wellness, your own um, the things that are important to you, whereas other people don't so much. It's so funny because even in these haters, I think that you do have a decent amount of haters here, but it feels almost like your haters, even when they hate you, they still admire you. And that kind of makes me think of like, like if somebody is trying to maybe sabotage your success, it sort of indicates that you have success to be sabotaged, right? Or at the very least, you have that successful energy to you. Even if you're not successful, people perceive you as successful. So it's like they see these really great qualities in you and they actually do admire them, but it's like their ego gets triggered by it, or they, yeah, they can't, like, what's that word, they can't get over themselves enough to really see how they can also benefit from you glowing up, or from you reaching success, for you showing up in the 3D in a way that's um, kind, warm, loving, and all that. But you also don't prioritize other people over yourself. I want to see what's underneath that. 10 of Swords. See, there's something here. It almost even feels like, oh, well, the collective didn't go through the things I went through. But then it's almost like, what if that is the collective's backstory, though? That you did go through your rock bottom experience at least once in life, probably more than likely more than one, but people may say like, oh, well, I went through this, the collective didn't. But maybe you did, and you just don't talk about it because you have bigger, better things to do. Like, you have bigger fish to fry. Like, you see, like, there's no reason in lingering in that pain. There's no reason to stay in the past experiences of me being at rock bottom, because I got the power now. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can achieve. I don't have to stay in that stuck 10 of Swords energy. It's also very interesting that I'm looking at the bottom of the deck here, this one, 10 of Pentacles, but it started to shift off, and there's quite a few cards here. It started to shift off to reveal the 10 of Swords. So you could very much have a background of having like a really rough go at things, not having an easy life, going through a lot of BS, but you're still staying focused, and therefore you will succeed. But I feel like, again, people are like, oh, well, they can do that, but I'm this. And this is all I've ever experienced. This is all I ever will experience because this is my backstory. But it's like, you can change that backstory, or not change the backstory, but you can change how you're showing up now and the future that you create. You don't have to keep creating your past to happen over and over and over again. There is a way to break free. And I feel like you show up in that way that proves that. But people probably still like to kind of be like, oh, well, they didn't go through this. They didn't go through that. So yeah, of course it's easy for them. And it's like, it probably wasn't easy for you. And it probably isn't easy for you. But people, again, they want to jump to their own conclusions here. But yeah, in terms of what puts the fear of God in people with this part of the reading, I feel like it's because you are open with your heart in a way that is very vulnerable and probably serving humanity or serving others. And therefore, I think you're like amassing good karma. And so people, instead of being like, I can do that too, they're more so like, well, they come up with excuses for not showing up in that way. They may create backstories that aren't true about you in order for them to feel better about the way that they are not showing up in a way that's pleasant and beneficial to society, I guess. Let's see if we need that 10 of Pentacles. 3 of Pentacles. So it's like, first off, you've built a foundation within yourself that probably took a lot of time, because also the mountains in the tarot and imagery, it's supposed to indicate typically the challenges that we face, those mountains that we need to climb in our lives, and how that's not easy. They are usually very challenging. Overcoming our obstacles, are all the things in life that try to hold us back, keep us held back, held down, whatever. You've overcome these challenges. You've faced them head on with maybe not a lack of fear, but rather, I'm afraid, but I'm still going to do it. And you've built such a steady foundation within yourself, and that is being reflected in your 3D reality, or it will be. And that's what people are like judging about. It's like, well, yeah, they can do that, but I can't. Or, it's easy for them, but it's not easy for me. So therefore I won't. And it's like, okay, whatever. Let's break out the Oracle, see if there's any additional messages. Please and thank you, Spirit. Any other additional messages for this reading for the collective? Either related to the topic or maybe advice, anything you think would be useful. Please and thank you, Spirit. Any other, that feels significant. Any other messages, please and thank you, Spirit. Ooh, cool. Okay, so 3 came out. We have Salt. This represents protection and banishing negativity. So people see you as incredibly protected by Spirit, and that probably is another thing that puts the fear of God in them, because you got Spirit on your side though. So it's like, try and mess with me, baby. You'll see. But yeah, you're heavily protected, and I feel like even part of this may be that part of the reason why you kind of need to be protected in the first place is because everybody around you wants to hate on you. And I hate to say that, but that's what's been showing up in this reading. But also, I think that spirit really just loves to protect you because you're doing something here that is beneficial, not just for yourself, but for others as well. You know, they see that you have a bigger purpose here. And so, spirit wants to protect you. Your ancestors want to protect you. Your friends on the other side want to protect you. Um, and then we have the moon card. This represents phases, cycles, and intuition. See, like you've been through so many different phases in life. You've been through so many toxic cycles in life, but you kept going, you kept improving. And then the intuition part, like you were hella intuitive, and I think that scares people, puts the fear of God in them, so to speak. Yeah. And so it's like, if people knew that you've been through all these phases and cycles and stuff, it's like if people knew your backstory, they may not judge you so harshly, maybe, or I don't know. Some people just want to judge people anyways and just want to hate on them anyways, regardless of what you've been through, regardless of what, your life has consisted of up until this point. They'll still just judge you and be like, wow, it's different because I'm blah, 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 and they're blah, blah, blah. But yeah. And I feel like this kind of makes you like more understanding and less judgmental towards others because you're like, I know what it's like to go through it. And then we have trunk. This represents stability, loyalty, and reliability. That's cute. You show up in a way that's stable, loyal, and reliable. And other people don't. And so they're going to project onto you to make you feel like you're doing something wrong, even though you're showing up in the best way you know how. You're stable for yourself, for others. You're loyal to those, well, to yourself and others. And you're reliable. It feels very much like if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Because it's like if I am not going to do it, I would just not say that I'm going to do it, right? But other people don't really live like that. You're very reliable, though. You're very sturdy and trustworthy. And that reflects through how you show up. But yet other people are maybe not so much, and therefore they want to judge you. And then bottom of the deck, we have so, and this is representing planning, setting intentions, and optimism. The optimism part is standing out to me because I think that you have probably reprogrammed your brain to be more optimistic. And I feel like, especially if you come from any sort of neurodivergencies, you probably have struggled with being pessimistic at times or for a long time in your life. But you have overcome that. You have changed for the better. You also plan for your future. You set intentions for yourself and you go towards them because you know that they are achievable. And other people just don't have that mentality, or they feel like, well, because it's like you can always come up with excuses to not do something. It only takes one reason to do it. Like, isn't that a saying? Like, you can always come up with excuses, but it only really takes one thing to make you want to go for something. Something like along those lines. But pretty much like you show up in a way that's authentic and you practice what you preach. And it's like, you know that it's not easy. You also know what it's like to come from nothing or come from, a shitty background. But yeah, you're like, I can show you how to do it if you were, if you would just put your pride aside, put your ego aside for a second. I could tell you. But it's like these people are just like too full of themselves, They think too highly of themselves that can't possibly lower their standards in order to ask somebody for help or to ask someone how they did that or something. Like, it's just like, ugh. But overall, you have an amazing energy, and it really just it's really like you're a mirror for these people, and they don't always like what they see. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, this is the reading. I really hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that it resonated. If it does resonate, feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you subscribe, you can become a part of the Hive Collective, because my name is V. Bees live in hives, and you can become an honorary bee like me, and we can be a little bee family together. If you like my readings and you'd like to see more, be sure to click that bell icon down below so that YouTube actually notifies you the next time that I upload. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.